Today we're diving into a chilling overlooked case of a serial killer that rattled a quiet community in the Seattle, Washington area over 50 years ago. This is Hold My Sweet Tea. Hi, everybody. I'm Holly.
And I'm Pearl. And we're going back to being borns.
To our roots.
Not the gray roots. In
Oh,
our
no.
hair. Where we were born roots. So we're doing a little hometown true crime
Yes.
week. We decided we wanted a little break from the South, and I was like, hey, let's do one from where we were born. That will be fun.
And I'm like, that is brilliant. Let's do it.
So here we are, doing it.
So my hometown is Seattle, Washington. That's where I was born, in King County, the little Washington-Tacoma area. I grew up in Federal Way, Washington, but my story today is in Renton, which is still a suburb of Seattle.
It still rains there.
Yep, it does. It's a drizzly rain, though, but it doesn't get sticky, nasty hot like it does here, so I'll take the rain any day.
Yeah. The constant sprinkle is cool.
Yes, that's why the Cullens lived in Forks.
Right. But were they blaming their glistening skin on the water?
No, the sunshine.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
They were like, oh my gosh, I'm so damp right now.
Right.
I'm glistening.
I'm glistening in my dampness.
That's why they go camping on sunny days.
Right. Not come to school.
Exactly.
Because they were only like hundreds of years old.
Exactly.
Pretending to be high school students.
That would be like the most, oh my God, I could never. I would have to go into some kind of hiding somewhere else. There's no way.
There's no freaking way I want to keep going to high school over and over and over again.
That's what nightmares are made of. You wake up and you're like, oh my God, I was back in high school.
Like,
no.
What was the point in being an immortal if I'm just going to replay high school over and over?
That's your...
No, thank you.
That's your karma for being an immortal.
Right.
To repeat high school over and over and over.
That is my personal hell right there.
It's metaphase. Anaphase. Yeah. He's not a super genius. He's just sparkly.
Right.
All right. Now that we're off the Cullens. Yeah. So it's a great idea. We're going back. And
some of us back further than others.
Exactly. And Pearl's episode on Thursday is going to be in
Worcester, Massachusetts.
Or as your aunt and dad say,
Worcester.
Because you can't pronounce the R.
No.
Not in Massachusetts.
Nope. They're allergic to R's.
Right. There's no I's here.
That's the funny thing of that is like they don't say the R there. And now I live in a place where they say Ara.
Ara, yep.
So it's like they get serious about the R.
Yep. That's why I said roots. They get real serious with that R. All right. Well, are we ready to jump into this one today?
Yeah, let's hit Seattle.
So as I was looking up, who do I want to do in Seattle? And maybe around the time that I was born there and lived there, and I start looking, and of course, who pops up? Ted Bundy. I'm like,
always.
The Green River Killer.
Also always.
So I'm like digging, and I come across the name Gary Gene Grant. Who exactly? Who?
I'm not an owl.
So, despite the horrific nature of his crimes, like, he largely faded from the public memory.
Which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
In a sense, because you want to remember the victims.
Exactly.
More than the killer, but.
And he was a serial killer before the actual term serial killer was coined.
Oh, fun time.
Yeah. So I just want to preface this by saying our deep dive today is largely thanks to the meticulous work of Cloyd Steiger. He is a brilliant retired homicide detective from the Seattle Police Department who spent 36 years on the force. He later wrote the book, Seattle's Forgotten Serial Killer, Gary Gene Grant. So Steiger is now the chief criminal investigator for the Washington State Attorney General's Homicide Investigation Tracking System. That's a mouthful, which is why they call it HITS for short. I was
going to say, I hope there's an acronym here.
Yes. It's a program vital to assisting local law enforcement in the Pacific Northwest by tracking and analyzing violent crime information. So they're able to share this information. So once somebody is tagged on there, they're on there forever, and they can look them up easily.
See all their stuff.
So if they're moving around,
from state to state, you're not
from state to state. Yeah, you're still tagged.
You're not reliant on the local database that may not contain information from another state.
Exactly. And that's why they're they don't have to look around. It's right there. So although Steiger knew many of the cases in the Pacific Northwest and thought he knew about every serial killer in the area, because, he lived there. He grew up there. Why not? Gary Gene Grant was a name that he had never come across. So this case received a good amount of press when it happened, but it happened right around the time the Vietnam War was dominating the headlines. Troops were coming home. There were protests on the rise, and the Manson family trials were taking place.
Of course, nobody's going to know anything but the Manson family. So he just kind
of, his stuff just kind of faded into the background and just went unnoticed for decades.
It was easy with all that.
So thank you, Cloyd Steiger. I doubt you listen to this, but thank you for this story. I literally bought his, I'm going to put it in the show notes, the link to his book. I went and purchased it on Spotify so I could listen to the whole thing and get some info on this. So let's get into who Gary Gene Grant was. So Gary was born on June 29th. That's the day before your birthday.
It is.
1951.
Looky. A cancer serial killer. Who'd have guessed?
Who'd have guessed it?
Oh my goodness.
In 1951 in Renton, Washington. His early life was marked by poverty and instability. Again, red flag, happens a lot. Growing up in a trailer park on the outskirts of the city, his parents both engaged in low-skilled labor and struggled financially. His mother's alcoholism fueled constant fighting, creating a mentally overstrained and stressful environment for young Gary.
I had a stepmom like that.
Yeah. But you're not a serial killer that we know of.
Yet.
There's still time. So he lost interest in education and he dropped out of school in the mid-60s. Toward the end of the decade, seeking an escape, he enlisted in the military and was assigned to the Navy. However, his service was short-lived. He was subjected to bullying by his peers, which is sad. You're in the Navy. You're supposed to be in a, brotherhood type situation.
Yeah,
but he was
come together.
Right now.
Over me.
We're going to start singing again. But he was bullied by his peers, and he began showing signs of mental illness and was dismissed just after a few months, citing health reasons. They would call him a mama's boy. So they, relentlessly picked on him while he was in there.
It's terrible.
Sad. Yeah. So Renton is a city in King County, Washington, an inner ring suburb of Seattle. It's situated about 11 miles southeast of downtown Seattle. And Renton straddles the southeast shore of Lake Washington. Lake Washington, pretty big too. It's like really long at the mouth of the Cedar River. While the early 1960s were like booming years for Renton due to the success of the Boeing commercial jet production, fun fact, while we lived there, my dad worked for Boeing. He was a machinist. So this happened all around the time that we lived there. And I'm like, ooh, that's scary.
That's why your dad couldn't understand me.
Right.
He couldn't hear.
He couldn't hear, right. He worked at the Boeing jet production. But, as the Vietnam War drew to a close, this caused a severe recession and job losses. So many people left Renton to find work elsewhere. So at the time of his first crime, Gary was just 18 years old. His first victim was Carol Erickson, a 19-year-old culinary arts student at Renton Vocational Technical Institute. On the evening of December 5th, 1969, Carol was walking home from the Renton Library along a dirt road parallel to the Cedar River. She liked to walk down there and watch the ducks swim, and, it's a really nice place.
I was going to say a little relaxing stroll.
And she lived in a little cabin down there because she had moved out of her parents' house. So she lived in a little cabin down there. So she was taking a little stroll along the river before she went home. She had a little notebook with her that she liked to copy down recipes that she would find in books at the library. And then she would write little notes to her friends and things like that in the little book. And she also had a little picture book with her ID and stuff in it. So that'll come along later. As she was walking along the path by the river, Gary suddenly attacked her, stabbing her with a knife before dragging her body into the nearby bushes. There, he sexually assaulted her corpse and further mutilated it, leaving lacerations on her neck. Her body was discovered the next morning, December 16th, by Edward Stewart, who was checking out fishing conditions on the Cedar River. And he thought it was a mannequin because we just discussed that the other day, that it's never a mannequin.
Yeah, it's not a mannequin.
So Edward notified the police. In 1969, the Renton Police Department had a small operation. There were no homicide unit, just a few detectives. Murders were very few and far between in that area.
Until now.
So police canvassed the area. They found drag marks leading from the trail to where the body lay. It didn't look like there was a struggle because the drag marks were like straight. It was just like straight drag. So there was nobody fighting or trying to kick and move or anything. So it looked like her killer had dragged her there after he killed her. So where he stabbed her on the trail and then he dragged her into the bushes and did his
and then stabbed her some more.
Stabbed her some more and like sexually assaulted her and mutilated her. So Carol's body was nude from the waist down except for a white pair of stockings. Her sweater was pulled up around her neck, exposing her bra. Her jeans and underwear and shoes were like strewn about. She had marks around her neck, and her shoelaces had been taken from her shoes that were lying nearby. So detectives fanned out and searched the area thoroughly. They did a really good job with this case, being that they were such a small police department, because you hear of other larger, and we've reported on, police departments that just botch everything.
Yeah. They didn't want to think it was transmission fluid by the bushes.
In a standard transmission? No.
With no car. They're like, oh, look at this. Somebody spilled transmission fluid.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and check it out.
It's a melted slushy.
So they found tire tracks near the river, a notebook, a picture book with Carol's name on it, and a blue coat. It was determined by the medical examiner that Carol's cause of death was a fatal stab wound to her heart. The ligature marks around her neck had not collapsed the airway, but it was narrowed. So he killed her first, and then he, I guess, strangled her while he was sexually assaulting her.
I guess that was his thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, her parents were notified and I just wanted to throw this in there. So back in the 60s and all that, they literally went on fingerprints and blood type when they were trying to pinpoint things. Like, this knife has blood on it. It's the same blood type as this one. There was no DNA and all this other stuff.
Right.
So when you had to identify a body, it wasn't a scientific thing where you're looking things up. You literally had to go down and
look at it.
So they really don't do that anymore unless it's an extreme case.
Right. Just most of the time it's confirmation, but
yeah,
they're like, we're pretty sure this is who she is, but before DNA gets back, would you like to check?
But it's like way less common now than it was then. So you literally had to go down and see your child or your parent or whoever it was in this situation.
Yeah, your next of kin, best friend, something, whoever, whatever.
It was sad.
Yeah.
So nearly a year later, so he waited a whole year, in September of 1970, Joanne Zuloff, a 17-year-old student from the same vocational school, so he stayed in the same area, was attacked in the middle of the day. She was going on a bike ride later that afternoon with her friend and decided to go take a walk while she was waiting for her friend to come over. Because, back in the 1970s, late 60s, you really didn't have a lot to do. So it's pretty up in the Pacific Northwest. So why not go take a walk? Sure.
Yep.
So as she was walking along, Grant struck her in the head with a stone. He liked to, attack from behind because apparently he's a coward.
Well, element of surprise. Right. It makes it easier.
Right. So he hit her with a stone in the back of the head. He dragged her into the woods where he sexually assaulted her and strangled her. Her nude body was found on September 22nd.
So this time he decided to forego the stabbing?
Yes. So he, smacked her with the stone, and then he, went ahead and did the deed and strangled her. Yeah. So I guess he was like, oh, I don't have my knife on me, but I have this stone. I don't know if he had his knife or not.
Yeah, I was going to say, he probably was just like, oh, look at this opportunity.
Yes.
Let me grab this big rock right here.
So Joanne's parents, she hadn't come home, and they were called her friend that she was supposed to go on a bike ride, which was named Robin Williams. It was a girl. I was like, oh, look, Robin Williams. So they called Robin and they were like, hey, is Joanne over there? Did she go on a bike ride with you? And she's like, no, I haven't seen her. We were supposed to go, but no Joanne. So they went out to look for her after she didn't come home that evening. As they were driving, a man that they didn't recognize had come out of the woods. So they reported that when they called the King County Sheriff's Office. But the King County Sheriff's Office didn't dispatch an officer. They said, if she didn't show up by morning, to call back. Just one of those quirky little teenagers that run off somewhere. Just call back in the morning. This wasn't the Renton police. This was the King County Sheriff's Department. So you see, as we get bigger, less stuff.
Right. They're like, eh.
So the next morning, there was still no sign of Joanne. They called the sheriff's office again. Search and rescue were dispatched with dogs. They found Joanne's body just after midnight in a ravine.
That took all day.
Yeah.
Wow.
They had to really search. So the nude body was covered in brush, so he covered this one up. Her bra and her underwear lay about 6 feet from her body.
So he undressed her all the way.
The detective told everyone not to move because it was late at night. So he took his flashlight and he approached the body. He kind of went in a circle with the flashlight just to kind of look around because it was dark in the woods. He wanted to verify that it was Joanne from a photo. And then he carefully checked for a pulse, and she was cold and dead. So he backed away. He posted a sheriff's deputy to guard the scene until daylight because he didn't want to disrupt any evidence or anything. So this girl's body had to lay out there all night. I mean, she's dead, but still, I'm sure her parents didn't.
It still sucks. Yeah.
I would have been like, I'm going to go stand out there too. So the next morning, they found 2 footprints in the mud near her body. So they made a plaster cast of them. So again, they're doing a good job at evidence and everything. Her parents had given them a description of what she was wearing, before this happened. And this included a watch and earrings, like her sweater, her jeans, everything. They found her clothing, but the jewelry was missing. She had petechial hemorrhaging from her chin to her hairline and around her eyes. So that's when you throw up really hard and you get those little red marks around your eyes and stuff because you're straining so bad, that's petechial hemorrhaging. Or when you're strangled to death.
Yeah.
That happens. So it was determined by the medical examiner that her cause of death was strangulation, possibly by a belt, because I guess it was wide enough.
Mm-hmm.
So he just like put his belt around her neck and strangled her.
He didn't have her shoestrings to use this time?
No. Apparently she must have had like slip-on shoes or something. I don't know. Or boots.
Who knows? Yeah.
Maybe she had rain boots on because it's, rainy up there. So, but this is the chilling detail about what I said about what her parents said she had on.
Mm-hmm.
Just 4 days after the murder, Grant gifted his girlfriend a watch that he had taken from Joanne's body.
Ew.
Yeah. He's like, I got you this watch. And he had a girlfriend. So he apparently, like, once they had interviewed him and, while he was in jail and stuff, a lot of these things were triggered by his mother. The first one, he said, was triggered by his mother because they had gotten into an argument and his mother pulled a knife on him.
Oh.
The second one was triggered by his girlfriend because they had gotten a fight. So he was out walking it off, apparently, and killed Joanne.
Came upon her. I see.
But then we come to the boys. And this one is like very heart-wrenching. So if you want to skip ahead, you may do so because it's horrible. The final and perhaps most, like I said, heart-wrenching murders occurred on April 20th, 1971. And I'm not saying that the girls were not heart-wrenching, but while passing a house, Grant saw 2 6-year-old little boys, Scott Andrews and Bradley Lyons, playing outside. The boys were playing in a vacant lot near their house with 5 or 6 other kids. After a while, Scott ran home. He got some cookies from his mom. He grabbed enough to share with his friends, and he went back out to play. His mother said that she didn't tell him to stay in the yard, and this guilt would haunt her for the rest of her life. And I get the guilt part, but it literally wasn't her fault, and I'm sure it would have happened
some way, somehow.
Some way, somehow. And maybe it's somebody else's kid, but still, it would still happen, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2 boys, they were best friends. They went off to play alone in a wooded area, but they never returned. So the parents were searching for them all day, calling, hey, have you seen Bradley? Have you seen Scott? They were just calling back and forth because they couldn't find their kids, and they knew that they played a lot together, and they would go out and play all day.
Mm-hmm.
So they waited till their husbands had gotten home later that evening to call the police because they were like, hey, the kids haven't come home. And so they determined, like, let's go ahead and call the police. Let's see what happens. So at that point, everybody in the neighborhood was searching for them. The sheriff's office called in search and rescue along with 40 members of the local fire department. They worked around the clock, checking area ponds, woods, rivers, because it had been raining a lot. So they were like, the ponds were swollen. They might have fallen in.
Fell in, yeah.
Yeah, like something. 2 days later, one of the firefighters, Daniel Auburn, was assisting in the search. So it had been 2 days. They were still searching for these boys.
Oh, my goodness.
And he found the boys near the Royal Hills apartment. Grant had threatened the boys with a knife, led them into the woods about, not very far from the Lyons residence because they lived right there in those apartments.
Mm-hmm.
He brutally beat the children. He stabbed Scott and he strangled Bradley. So he stabbed Scott first because he had lured, the boys had split up and I guess they were out playing. So
Mm-hmm.
he got Scott first. He had told him to undress and Scott was like, no, and tried to run away. So he grabbed him and then Scott went ahead and undressed and he stabbed Scott. And then Bradley pops up and he was trying to hide it, but then he ended up having to grab Bradley and strangle him.
Mm-hmm.
So after the unspeakable acts, he covered their bodies in leaves and branches and all that stuff. So again, they found footprints of a tennis shoe at the crime scene and they took plaster casts. So before I get into the rest of Gary Jean Grant's case, a man named John Chance walked into Valley General Hospital in Renton. He asked to be admitted to the psych ward. He didn't want to identify himself at first. He was agitated and said he was all mixed up. like in the head. He's like, I'm just all mixed up. And he's like, I wanted to come in, and he told Dr. Rorson that he was considering wanting to hurt children.
Considering.
Yeah. He said he was too much of a coward to kill himself, and he thought that the Manson family was controlling his mind, telling him to do things. So the doctor, they gave him an injection of Thorazine. They put him in a secure room. The following Thursday, Dr. Rorson was at home, and he had heard about 2 local boys and how they had not been found yet. And a light bulb like went off in his head.
Yeah.
So
like, wait a minute.
Right. He's like, so on the same night, this guy come in and he's wanting to be admitted to the psych ward. And he said that I think about hurting children. So Dr. Rorson didn't know if he was bound by like doctor-patient privilege since the boys hadn't been found yet. They were just missing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So he had the nurses at the hospital contact hospital attorneys to get their opinion. So the hospital went ahead and, because it was a case of children, they went ahead and called the police for him. A detective interviewed the doctor, went and talked to John Chance, who was still on Thorazine, told him his rights and asked him if he understood. And he said yes. They questioned him on several things. They asked him about the boys. He rambled about not remembering things and how at one point he thought he was from Saturn and he had met Jesus Christ.
Sounds like he was on LSD and not.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, he was on some mind-altering substances or had too many of them and went a little cuckoo.
Mm-hmm.
So after the interview, he was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where he was admitted after much debate because they didn't want to admit him. They were like, we've done a psych eval and there's really nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. He's just cuckoo.
Or acting cuckoo.
Acting like that. So the doctors, they went ahead and admitted him that morning, but then they scheduled him to be released later that day. So the police went and picked him up and took him to the station where he would intentionally lie about things. They said that he was very intelligent, but he would tell them what they wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So they took him to the crime scene after the boys were found. He described how he had stabbed one of the boys, strangled the other with a cord. But he was thoroughly confused about the area and unable to retrace his steps. So he didn't seem to be concerned that the boys were dead. He was later diagnosed with schizophrenia and said that to be legally insane because he didn't know the difference between right and wrong. He was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Bradley Lyons and Scott Andrews. Then he was arraigned for the murders on May 3rd, 1971. So what happened is he had read or watched something on the news. So he absorbed it into his mind and he's like, yeah, this is what happened. This is what I did. But I'm very sketchy about the area because I don't know how I did it. So he was just telling them what he wanted to hear. So people do stuff like this.
False confess.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't understand the false confession thing at all. So let's get back to the boys. So a breakthrough in the case came on April 28th, 1971. Several searches had taken place over the area the next few days where the bodies were discovered. Search teams found a hunting knife with dried bloodstains not far from where the boys' bodies were found. So lab analysis confirmed the blood matched Scott Andrews' blood type. The knife had black tape wrapped around its handle. So when they took it into evidence, they had peeled it off and there was a name, Tom Evison, engraved in the handle. So Evanson was quickly located and interrogated. The police said he told them that he had sold the knife to a friend, Jerry Triplett. The next day, Triplett was questioned and revealed that he sold the knife to another friend, Jim Monger. Monger, in turn, informed officers that he lent the knife to Gary Grant. I was like, this knife has been through some stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently.
It's like the Brotherhood of the Traveling Knife.
Right. And then it ended up in Gary Grant's hands where he traveled it into somebody. So authorities wasted no time. On April 30th, 1971, Gary Grant was detained in his trailer and brought in for questioning. As he was being put into the police car, the detectives noticed the bottom of his shoe. It looked just like the shoe print they took of the plaster cast at the scenes where they found the boys and Joanne's body. It had a circle on the heel part, like the several circles. I don't remember what kind of shoes those are, but I remember seeing shoes with that circle
like,
on
dun,
it.
dun,
So it was very
dun.
like, boom, right there.
Yeah.
So initially he couldn't provide an alibi for the day the boys were murdered, but he agreed to take a polygraph test. First, he claimed amnesia. Then he broke down sobbing and eventually confessed to the killings to the polygraph guy. So he came in and he's like, he just confessed to the murder. And then they had him like write a written statement, which later he says he doesn't remember any of that. He doesn't remember writing any of that.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Like whatever you can use to your advantage when you realize, oh, whoops.
Right. So the next day, like Grant and his father and the lawyer were in one of the interrogation rooms and they were talking. And Grant confessed to all 4 murders. He detailed how they occurred. However, there was a very significant complication because Renton Police Captain William G. Frazee had illegally installed recording devices in the interrogation room.
Uh-oh.
So this illegal wiretapping led Grant's lawyers to file a motion on June 1971 to drop all charges, citing a violation of his constitutional rights. Fortunately, on June 30th, the appeal was rejected because Grant's confession had already been legally recorded on the day of his arrest because of the
polygraph
guy, and he
gotcha.
wrote it down. So despite this, Frazee faced charges of unlawful electronic interception of a conversation, which is a misdemeanor, and subsequently he was suspended from the police force.
So my guess is that no one in the room knew they were being recorded.
Right.
Because as long as one person knows, it makes it not illegal anymore.
Just because they were all in there and like the lawyer didn't know, his father didn't know, and Gary didn't know. So that was like the thing. They were like illegally.
And I'm sitting here going, was he part of the interrogation team or was like someone else interrogating him who also didn't know?
It must have been somebody else like that was in there with them, but that was the whole thing. They were like, no, this, you illegally installed this. Nobody knew that there was recording devices in there.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Frazee, he received 4 months of probation, no jail time, and he retired soon after. King County Superior Court Judge David Sukop, who sentenced Frazee, called him an honorable police officer who made a mistake in the investigation of one of the most brutal sets of murders to ever occur in King County.
And for me, I'm like, I get it. Because you're like, we can't not get this guy.
Right. We already had a cuckoo bananas guy in here. So let's like get this guy because he's confessing literally.
And there's 4 people dead. And so I understand that you feel like you got to do what you got to do, but you got to do it the right way.
Right. That's like when people are go, oh, just record them. No, that's illegal. You can't do that without their knowledge. That's why when you get a phone call, it's like, this call may be recorded, blah, blah, blah. So Grant's trial began on August 12th, 1971. The prosecution's main evidence included an audio recording of his confession, the bloodstained knife, and the plaster cast of his tennis shoe imprints, which matched the size and treads on his shoes that he was wearing when he was arrested. Several acquaintances testified for the prosecution, placing Gary Grant near the crime scenes on the day of the murders and noting his dirty clothes. So they had seen him and they were like, why is Gary so filthy? Well, he had just murdered somebody and dragged them into the woods.
And was rolling around in the mud with their dead bodies.
Yes. Grant's lawyers, James Anderson and Nick Marshall, insisted on their client's insanity, arguing for leniency and hoping to spare him the death penalty, which was a possibility in Washington state at the time. And it was actually hanging. They still did hanging back then. His father and close friends testified that Grant had always been a passive, harmless individual.
Obviously not.
Obviously not. Like he would have, these points of where he couldn't take things anymore.
Yeah, because he was pushing everything else down. He was passive in front of you and then took it out on strangers.
Innocent strangers, right. The forensic psychiatric exam was conducted, and while it found Grant to be sane, the psychiatrist noticed he was impulsive, struggling with self-control, and often acted out of emotionally in high stress situations, which is why I said, like, they had later said that he had, murdered one because of his mother and the other because of his girlfriend. I'm like, what did he do for the boys?
Yeah, what occurred before that?
Well, they said that could have been the result of him being picked on when he was little and the military and all that. So it was like his peers. I'm like, did he think he was still a little kid? That's why they called him a mama's boy?
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird.
Possibility. The psychiatrist also suggested the crimes were a form of escapism, a way to vent frustrations from unresolved personal issues. But you still don't go kill people. Go rage out in the woods and stab a tree. Like, shit.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously mentally unstable and ill, but he's not get away with murder insane.
Yes. So in a dramatic move, the defense, despite having moved for its dismissal due to its existing unlawful recorded interview between Grant and his attorney, Grant himself took the stand as the defense's final witness. According to Deputy Prosecutor Michael DiGiulio, who worked on the case, Grant basically went into a trance. He didn't explicitly admit to the murders. He walked right up to them, making cross-examination difficult. So he just boom, went into this trance up there. In closing arguments, Prosecutor Edmund Allen, a former assistant chief criminal deputy, brought in a special prosecutor, I can't speak today, to handle the complicated case, asked the jury to find Grant guilty of all 4 murders and impose the death penalty. Marshall countered, appealing to the jury's humanity and describing Grant's quote-unquote split personality and quote-unquote unconscious rage stemming from a childhood filled with misery, turmoil, and hopelessness. After 2 full days of deliberation on August 25th, 1971, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all 4 counts of murder. However, the jury did not impose the death penalty. On September 29th, 1971, just 3 months after his 20th birthday, Gary appeared for sentencing. The defense requested a new trial, which Suckup, which was the judge, he denied. The prosecution asked for 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole, citing a psychiatrist's pre-sentencing examination that suggested that Gary at times doesn't know what he's doing and could commit more murders. The defense again argued for concurrent terms, emphasizing Grant's psychiatric problems and the psychiatrist's opinion that he would be a model prisoner.
Why wouldn't he flash out and kill somebody in there?
I'm like, you don't think he would do it there? I don't know. Maybe he can't sneak up on him. I don't know.
That's still a high-stress situation here. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be some more turmoil for you.
Exactly. The judge sided with the prosecution, imposing 4 consecutive life terms, effectively ensuring Grant would spend the rest of his natural life in prison. Immediately after the sentencing, the initial attorneys withdrew, and Grant's parents hired a new lawyer to appeal the conviction. They were dissatisfied that Marshall and Anderson hadn't argued that Gary was entirely innocent of the murders. I'm sorry, what?
He's not entirely innocent.
He's not. So the appeal went to the 3-judge panel of Washington Court of Appeals on July 9th, 1973. They found no errors justifying dismissal or a new trial. Requests for review by the Washington State Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court were also denied, solidifying Grant's conviction and sentencing.
Yeah, there's no reason to waste the time of the court for this junk.
And keep going back, right. So Gary Gene Grant, now 73 years old, remains imprisoned at the Monroe Correctional Complex in Monroe, Washington. So he's still alive, being a model prisoner, apparently. He largely remains an obscure figure despite the horrific nature of his crimes. While he's claimed that he doesn't remember the murders, like I said, he doesn't remember the victims, the families, the police officers, all that stuff. But everybody in that town literally went through his reign of terror, and they will never forget what he did. The physical landscape of these crimes has changed dramatically over the decades. The muddy trail where Carol Erickson's body was found is now a well-maintained path, and it has like a cat sculpture nearby where she was killed.
Mm-hmm.
The cabin she was walking home to had been replaced with a little like coffee latte stand. The woods where Joanne Zuloff's body were discovered are now peaceful and beautiful with houses sitting, and there's like the little trails and stuff. And the largely wooded area overlooking the Cedar River where Scott Andrews and Bradley Lyons lost their lives remains quiet, its serenity masking the unspeakable acts of what happened.
Looks like
Yeah.
nothing ever happened there.
Nothing ever happened. This is where the bodies were found, but it doesn't even look
sweet,
like that.
peaceful, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the trailer park where Gary Gene Grant lived with his troubled life and his parents has since been removed, replaced by high-end condominiums near the beautiful Jean Coulon Memorial Beach Park. These changes are a stark contrast to the permanent scars left on the victims' families. Their lives forever altered by the forgotten serial killer. I'm like, I know this happened and everything, but why hasn't the family spoke out and kept his name relevant? Because
they don't want his,
I guess so.
they don't want his name
They don't
to
want
be
him
relevant.
to be relevant. Yeah,
They
that's
want-
true.
Yeah.
And that's why I went in and looked with the victims and I gave you some
Yeah.
information about them, because it doesn't need to be just about him because he is forgotten. But
Yeah. And I mean, as it should be, like, but they need to remember their
Right.
family members and not the dude who
Yeah.
did the terrible stuff to them.
But like even with the devastating impact that this had, it's weird how these people can just become forgotten.
Yeah.
But it was around the time of all this other big news going on, so
Right.
there it is. But again, I'm going to put Cloyd Steiger's link to his book in the show notes. So if you want to go purchase the book, or you can download it on any device, I did Spotify, you can. It's an interesting read, and he goes into great detail with this story.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to say that a lot of us have had terrible childhoods where we
Yeah.
were picked on and lived in,
Shoddy conditions.
yeah, very shoddy conditions. I mean, I grew up in a apartment complex where
hmm
like the poorest of poor people lived, and most of them were 10 to 15 people in a
Yeah.
2-bedroom apartment. So the land of cockroaches.
Yeah.
And here I am not murdering people.
Right. And you're a Cancer. Like,
And I'm a
come on.
Cancer. I'm like, totally got the odds stacked up against me.
Right.
But here I am out here not stabbing people.
Yet.
Yet. The older I get,
Right. Oh
the
my
meaner
God.
I get.
The rage fills you the older you get. It's like crazy.
The
I'm
meaner I
like,
get and the less I care about people thinking I'm a horrible person. I'm just like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it.
Just, yeah. Oh yeah. Like
Bitch mode
I don't
activated.
I don't hold back. It just flies out of my mouth now. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care.
that's what I said.
I don't care about your feelings.
Bitch mode activated. Thanks.
Yeah. But it's just crazy that as I was going through this, I was like, oh my gosh, we literally lived up there, because I was born in like 1972. So I was born right after this, but I had older siblings. They were all like significantly older than me. So they lived in this area. My parents, my dad worked right there.
They could have been red rummed.
They could have been, but they weren't.
No.
But they lived in this area while all this was happening. So
Crazy.
it's crazy.
Cool. Again, I think this was a great idea.
Yes, absolutely. We'll have to do some more fun things like this.
Yeah, so hit us up if you want your birthplace
Yeah, that would be cool.
to be on the show.
On the show. And I have lots and lots of pictures of the case. So I will post all of those. And again, I'm going to shout out Mr. Steiger, because a lot of those are from the police files that he went into. So
Cool.
I will make sure to give him all the credits, because he's an awesome guy.
Giving credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
Cool. Speaking of credits, where credits are due.
Yes.
Our theme music is by Patty Salzetta.
She gets all the credits.
And we're going to be, sitting there with our phones in our hands, just waiting for those messages.
Yes. TikTok, people, TikTok. Oh, and we're also on TikTok.
Yes, we are. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Message us somewhere. Email us. steeped@holdmysweettea.com.
And we also have merch.
We do have merch.
Nobody's bought anything yet except for us, but we have merch.
We bought stuff from ourselves. No one else has bought anything.
But we will have that link on the show notes as well as the Buy Me a Coffee.
They're right. The Buy Me a Coffee if you'd like to donate. We are trying to save up for some new equipment.
Yes.
Because the stuff we got to start out with was like uber cheap. And
we both looked at the little soundboard. We're like,
we've had some issues. So we just want to make life a little easier for ourselves. So if you want to donate to our cause, definitely use the Buy Me a Coffee link. We have those on our Facebook page. We have them on Instagram. They're on TikTok. So everywhere you go.
In the show notes. We link them every time.
They're there. So just go get it.
Support us, please.
I think I'm gonna do like a screen recording of
of
whole
all the
thing,
things. That's
just like
perfect.
Post that. So then you can actually see how to order it. Just in case. I know that we've got some older people who just may not be able to do it.
My sister.
The online shopping is a mystery.
Right.
So I'm going to show you. Yeah. And then we'll post that.
A tutorial, if you will.
Yes. And also make sure you share links to your favorite episode, links to our socials. Just like spread the word.
Yep. And they can reach us on Steeped.
Oh, yeah, I already said that.
Oh, you already said the steeped part. Yes. I'm so used to it at the end.
Steeped@holdmysweettea.com.
There we go. Well, see, Pearl has covered everything.
Now you said it. Now we've said it like more than once.
And if anybody's still listening, Hold My Sweet Tea is a Drunken Bee production.
Bzz.
And please stay safe out there and keep yourself cool because it's sticky hot everywhere. And we feel for you because we live in it all the time.
Yep.
And just because we're dipping doesn't mean you can't keep sipping. Bye. Don't take your rage out on somebody.